My wife never let me visit her farm. 12 years of marriage. Every time I suggested Colorado, Helen had an excuse. Too busy. Wrong season. Maybe next year. After she died, I inherited it. When I went inside, I froze. Helen had been hiding an $18 million cannabis empire, industrial greenhouses, professional equipment, a business license worth $3.8 million. Her brother Vincent called the next morning. I'll give you $850 to take it off your hands. Cash. Today. $850,000 for $18 million in assets. That's when I understood. Helen didn't keep me away to protect the farm. She kept me away to protect me. My name is Ben Mitchell, 58, CPA, 34 years catching people who steal money for a living. Helen married a forensic accountant for a reason. And when she died, she left me every tool I'd need to destroy whoever had been stealing from our family. Vincent thought he was buying Helen's farm from a grieving widower. What he was actually doing was confessing to a federal crime. Listen, if someone you trust won't let you see something they own, there's a reason, and that reason might be worth $18 million. Hit subscribe because this story will teach you exactly what to look for when family starts acting suspicious about money. Whether you're driving, working, or just can't sleep, stick around. Because Helen's last gift wasn't just an inheritance, it was revenge. Last Tuesday, her attorney called me into his office to read the will. James Whitmore had been Helen's lawyer for 15 years, handling everything from our home purchase to her business contracts. I expected the usual, our house in Phoenix, her retirement accounts, maybe a small inheritance from her father's old farm in Colorado. Benjamin Mitchell, Whitmore said, adjusting his glasses and clearing his throat. Your wife has left you the entirety of her estate. This includes a residential property in Phoenix valued at $420,000, various retirement and investment accounts totaling approximately $600,000. I nodded. That matched what I expected. And, Whitmore continued, a farm property located at 1247 Canyon Ridge Road, Durango, Colorado, valued at approximately $18.5 million. I stared at him. The words didn't make sense together. Helen, farm, 18 million. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Mr. Mitchell. The property is legally yours. Mrs. Mitchell was very specific about the inheritance structure. Whitmore handed me a thick manila envelope. Keys to the property, insurance documentation, and access information for various business accounts associated with the farm operation. Business accounts? Helen had always described her father's old place as a small family farm. Just a little place, she'd tell people at parties. Not worth visiting, too much work, too far from civilization. For 12 years, whenever I suggested we drive out to Colorado together, she'd change the subject. Too busy with work, wrong season for travel, maybe next year when we had more time. Mr. Whitmore, what kind of farm is worth $18 million? Mrs. Mitchell handled all the business arrangements personally, Mr. Mitchell. She never discussed the operational details with me. I was simply instructed to transfer complete ownership to you upon her death. I left Whitmore's office with more questions than answers. Helen had hidden an $18 million property from me for 12 years. She'd managed some kind of business operation I knew nothing about. And she'd structured her will to make me the sole owner of something I'd never seen. Now I knew why she never let me visit her farm, because apparently it wasn't just a farm. The next morning, Vincent Kane called me. Helen's older brother, 51 years old, and the kind of man who always seemed to know everyone's business better than they did. Vincent had that particular combination of confidence and concern that made people trust him with important decisions. Ben, buddy, I heard about the will reading. Hell of a thing, right? Helen never mentioned the scope of that property to you? Not really, Vincent. She always said it was just a small farm. Vincent laughed. Helen was modest about her success. That property's been in our family for 3 generations. Good land, but it's been nothing but headaches for Helen. Maintenance costs, property taxes, irrigation issues. 18 million seems like a lot for a problem property. Ben, that's actually why I'm calling. I've got some good news for you. I've already got a buyer lined up for Helen's place. Serious cash offer. $850,000. We can close within 24 hours. $850,000 for an $18 million property. Vincent, that seems significantly below market value. Ben, trust me on this. I've been helping Helen manage that property for years. The operational costs are astronomical. Equipment maintenance, regulatory compliance, seasonal labor. You don't want to get stuck with that burden. I pulled out my calculator. 850,000 represented approximately 4.6% of the property's assessed value. Vincent, even accounting for maintenance issues, wouldn't the land alone be worth more than 850? Ben. Vincent's voice took on that patient tone he used when he thought someone was being unreasonable. You're thinking like an accountant instead of thinking like a businessman. That property requires specialized knowledge to operate profitably. Water rights, agricultural regulations, seasonal workforce management. Helen spent decades learning that business. What kind of agricultural operation requires decades to learn? Organic farming, Ben. Specialized crops. Very technical, very regulated industry. Helen never told you because she didn't want to worry you about the complexity. Vincent's explanation sounded reasonable, but something bothered me about his eagerness to sell quickly. I appreciate the concern, Vincent, but I think I should see the property first. Ben, that's exactly what I was afraid you'd say. Look, I understand the curiosity. But driving out to Colorado, spending money on hotels and rental cars, taking time away from your retirement, what's the point? This buyer won't wait forever. How long will he wait? 48 hours maximum. Cash deal. No financing contingencies. No inspection periods. Clean break. Vincent was pushing hard for a quick sale. Too hard. Vincent, I'm going to Colorado tomorrow. Long pause. Ben, I really think that's a mistake. That property is going to overwhelm you. Helen managed it because she grew up in that business. You're going to see 18 million in assets and think you've won the lottery. But you're not seeing the liabilities, the operational costs, the regulatory headaches. I'll take my chances. Another pause. Ben, family takes care of family, right? I'm trying to help you avoid a financial disaster. This buyer is offering you a clean exit from something you don't understand. Vincent, I've been auditing agricultural operations for 30 years. I think I can evaluate a farm. This isn't just any farm, Ben. What kind of farm is it? The complicated kind. Trust me, buddy. Take the 850 and enjoy your retirement. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for 30 minutes, staring at the keys Helen's attorney had given me. Heavy brass keys on a simple ring. One for the house, one for the barn, one for something called the office. I'd been married to Helen for 12 years. I'd done our taxes every year. I'd reviewed every significant financial decision we made together. I'd never seen a single document related to this farm. No property tax bills, no maintenance receipts, no insurance statements, no business correspondence. For a woman who kept every grocery receipt in alphabetical order, Helen had been remarkably quiet about her $18 million inheritance. Vincent's call bothered me for several reasons. His detailed knowledge of the property's operational challenges, his immediate availability of a buyer, his insistence that I shouldn't visit before selling, his claim that Helen had asked for his help managing the property. Helen never asked anyone for help with anything, especially financial decisions. I called Southwest Airlines and booked a flight to Durango for the next morning. Vincent could wait 48 hours. After 34 years of auditing other people's finances, I'd learned that when someone doesn't want you looking at the books, that's exactly when you need to look at the books. And Vincent really didn't want me looking at Helen's farm. Durango, Colorado sits in the southwestern corner of the state, surrounded by mesa country and the San Juan Mountains. The landscape reminded me of Arizona, but with more trees and considerably more expensive real estate. I rented a car at the regional airport and drove the 15 miles to 1247 Canyon Ridge Road. The address Helen's attorney gave me led to a gated property about 15 miles outside town. Private road, professional security system, no neighbors visible. Just rolling hills covered in pinyon pine and what looked like an industrial complex disguised as agricultural buildings. I pulled up to the gate and used Helen's key. It swung open automatically, revealing a paved road that curved through several hundred acres of well-maintained property. The main house was modest by $18 million standards, a two-story farmhouse that probably dated to the 1940s. Traditional ranch architecture, wraparound porch, mountain views. But behind the house stood 15 large buildings that definitely weren't traditional barns. These were climate-controlled structures with ventilation systems, electrical conduits, and security cameras. Each building was roughly the size of a basketball court and built to industrial specifications. Professional concrete foundations, metal framework, sophisticated infrastructure. This wasn't a farm. This was some kind of manufacturing operation. I parked and walked to the first building, used Helen's barn key. The door swung open, and I stepped into what looked like a greenhouse designed by NASA. Rows of cannabis plants stretched from floor to ceiling under full-spectrum LED lighting, hydroponic systems with automated nutrient delivery, computer-controlled temperature and humidity, professional-grade cultivation equipment that probably cost more than most people's houses. I walked through all 15 buildings. Every single one was identical. Hundreds of mature cannabis plants in various stages of growth, tended by automated systems that monitored every environmental variable. This wasn't someone's personal hobby garden. This was industrial-scale cannabis cultivation. Helen had owned a cannabis empire. I found the office building near the back of the property. Smaller structure, but packed with computers, filing cabinets, and business equipment. The setup reminded me of the accounting firms I'd audited. Professional workspace designed for serious financial management. On the wall, framed and prominently displayed, hung something called a Colorado Cannabis Cultivation License. License number CO 2016-3891, issued to Canyon Ridge Agricultural LLC. Helen Mitchell listed as primary licensee. Renewal date, December 2024. Current market value listed $3.8 million. $3.8 million just for the license to operate legally. Below the license hung certificates from the Colorado Department of Revenue, the Department of Agriculture, and various industry associations. Awards for sustainable growing practices, environmental compliance, product quality. This wasn't some fly-by-night operation. This was a legitimate, regulated business that had been operating successfully for years. I sat down at Helen's desk and started opening drawers. Business cards for distributors, processors, testing laboratories, contracts with delivery services, packaging companies, marketing firms, insurance policies worth millions, banking information for multiple accounts, payroll records for seasonal employees. This wasn't a side business Helen had been running quietly. This was a full-scale commercial operation that required permits, inspections, regulatory compliance, and professional management. Helen had never mentioned any of this, not once in 12 years of marriage. More importantly, how had she managed all this while living in Phoenix with me? Cannabis cultivation requires daily attention. The licensing requirements alone demanded constant regulatory compliance. The growing cycles, the harvesting, the processing, the distribution. Someone had to be running day-to-day operations. I opened Helen's computer. Password protected, but Helen was predictable about passwords. Our wedding anniversary, 051712. The desktop loaded, and I found folders labeled Financials, 2016-2024, Operations Management, Regulatory Compliance, Employee Records, and V Communications. V Communications, Vincent. I opened the folder and found 8 years of email exchanges between Helen and Vincent. Thousands of messages, weekly phone call summaries, business strategy discussions. Turns out Helen's brother had been more than just offering friendly family advice about selling quickly. Vincent had been managing Helen's cannabis empire for 8 years. The V Communications folder contained 8 years of detailed email exchanges between Helen and Vincent. Thousands of messages documenting every aspect of Canyon Ridge Agricultural's operations. I started with the most recent and worked backwards. March 15th, 2024. Helen, the Q1 numbers look fantastic. $26.3 million in gross revenue, After processing costs, labor, and distribution fees, we're looking at about 18 million net profit. Not bad for a little family farm, right? LOL. Remember, when you file taxes, stick to the script. Small agricultural operation, equipment losses due to depreciation and crop failures. We'll report about 800,000 in revenue. Same strategy as always. I read that email 3 times. 26.3 million in annual revenue, reported as 800,000 for tax purposes. I opened Helen's QuickBooks software. The system contained 2 completely separate sets of financial records. The first showed exactly what Vincent described: minimal revenue, constant equipment expenses, barely breaking even, classic small farm struggling against market conditions and operational costs. The second set of books told a dramatically different story. Canyon Ridge Agricultural LLC had generated over $200 million in revenue since receiving its cultivation license in 2016. After operational expenses, the business had produced approximately $140 million in pure profit. Helen had been hiding a cannabis empire that generated more annual revenue than most Fortune 500 companies. I continued reading through Vincent's emails. August 22nd, 2023. Vincent, I'm getting increasingly uncomfortable with our tax reporting strategy. We're underreporting by 25 million annually. The IRS audits cannabis businesses regularly because of the banking restrictions. What happens if they discover the discrepancies? Vincent's response: Helen, we've discussed this repeatedly. Cannabis is still federally illegal, which creates banking complications that force everyone to operate in regulatory gray areas. Half the licensed businesses in Colorado use similar tax strategies. Besides, you're not equipped to handle this operation independently. You need my expertise to manage the operational and regulatory complexities. Trust the system we've built. September 18th, 2023. Vincent, I want to discuss bringing Ben into the business. He's a CPA with 34 years of experience. He could help us restructure everything to ensure complete legal compliance, proper tax reporting, transparent accounting, regulatory best practices. Vincent's response: absolutely not, Helen. Ben doesn't understand this industry. He'd want to report everything, pay full federal taxes, operate like some Boy Scout nonprofit. We'd lose 60% of our profits to federal taxation and regulatory overhead. Helen, you're being naive about the realities of cannabis business. This operation works because I understand how to navigate the complexities. Keep Ben out of it. October 30th, 2023. Vincent, I'm serious about restructuring our tax reporting. I've been researching federal cannabis tax law with a specialized attorney. We can operate completely legally and still maintain strong profitability. I want to schedule a meeting with our accountant to discuss proper compliance. Vincent's response: Helen, you're not thinking clearly about the consequences. I've spent 8 years building this operation from nothing. Every distributor, every processor, every regulatory inspector. I have personal relationships that keep us operating smoothly and profitably. You start changing fundamental systems now, you'll destroy everything we've built together. Think about Ben's retirement security. Think about your legacy. Don't jeopardize our family's financial future because of some sudden attack of conscience. The emails painted a clear picture of an ongoing conflict. Helen wanted transparency and legal compliance. Vincent wanted to maintain the profitable but legally questionable status quo. And Helen had been losing that argument for months. December 8th, 2023. Vincent, my oncologist confirmed the cancer has metastasized. Aggressive timeline, maybe 6 months. I need to make decisions about business succession. I'm updating my will to leave everything to Ben. He has the financial expertise to handle this operation properly. Vincent's response: Helen, that's the grief and fear talking. Ben can't handle this operation. He doesn't have the industry relationships, the regulatory knowledge, or the street smarts necessary for cannabis business. If you want family to maintain control, leave operational management to me. I'll ensure Ben's financial security without overwhelming him with business complexities. Trust me to handle this properly. Helen's final response: Vincent, I've made my decision. Ben inherits everything. Complete ownership, full operational control. He'll figure out what's best for the business and the family. Helen had left me this property knowing exactly what I'd find. She'd given me every password, every key, every piece of documentation I'd need to understand the scope of Vincent's operation. Helen had kept every receipt and every lie. I spent 2 hours reading through Vincent's emails, documenting 8 years of systematic tax underreporting. Then I called him from Helen's office. Ben, how's Colorado treating you? Getting a good feel for that property? It's very interesting, Vincent. Much more interesting than you described. Ah, you found the cannabis plants. Yeah, Helen had a small medical cultivation permit. Personal use stuff, maybe a little extra for friends and family. Nothing commercial scale. That's part of why the buyer's offering what he's offering. He'll have to deal with disposing of all that plant material. Vincent, I'm looking at a commercial cultivation license valued at $3.8 million. Silence. Then, Ben, you don't understand what you're looking at. That license has operational restrictions, zoning limitations, regulatory compliance costs. The actual net operational value is significantly less than the paper valuation. I'm also looking at revenue reports showing $26.3 million last year. Ben, buddy, you're misreading those documents. Cannabis accounting is extremely complicated. Massive write-offs, depreciation schedules, regulatory compliance costs, federal tax restrictions. The net operational profit, after all expenses, is minimal. Vincent, I'm a CPA. I understand accounting principles, but you don't understand cannabis accounting specifically. This isn't like auditing insurance companies or manufacturing businesses. This industry operates under completely different regulatory and taxation frameworks. I pulled up Helen's emails on the computer screen. Vincent, what accounting framework allows you to underreport $25 million in annual revenue? Much longer pause this time. Ben, I think you need to be very careful about what you're implying here. I'm not implying anything. I'm reading Helen's business correspondence. Canyon Ridge Agricultural LLC generated $26.3 million in revenue last year. Helen's tax returns reported $800,000. That's systematic underreporting. Ben, you're completely out of your depth here. You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. Come back to Phoenix immediately. We'll sit down together, go through everything properly with qualified cannabis business attorneys. I'll show you how this industry really works. I'm fine reviewing the documentation here in Colorado. Ben, listen very carefully. That business operation involves complex federal cannabis regulations, state compliance requirements, and industry-specific accounting practices that require years of experience to understand properly. You start making uninformed accusations based on incomplete information, you could jeopardize everything Helen spent decades building. Vincent, Helen built a legitimate business generating legitimate revenue. You've been systematically underreporting that revenue to avoid federal taxation. Ben, I'm trying to help you here. Don't make decisions you'll regret. What kind of decisions? The kind that attract unwanted federal attention, IRS criminal audits, DEA investigations, the kind that transform $18 million in legitimate assets into federal criminal liability. The threat was clear. Vincent was suggesting that if I pursued the tax compliance issues, I could face federal prosecution myself. Vincent, are you threatening me? Ben, I'm trying to protect you from making a catastrophic mistake. I hung up. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text message from Vincent. Ben, found some important paperwork Helen signed before she died. Turns out she formally added you as a business partner back in March. 50% ownership, shared operational responsibility. That makes you legally responsible for all business operations and tax filings since March 15th, 2024. We should definitely talk face to face. I stared at the text message for 5 minutes. Helen died on March 20th. If Vincent was telling the truth, I'd been a legal partner in Canyon Ridge Agricultural for 5 days before Helen's death. 5 days during which the business generated over $2 million in revenue that was systematically underreported to federal authorities. 5 days during which I knew absolutely nothing about the business, the revenue, the operations, or the tax reporting strategies. Vincent had just claimed I was legally responsible for $2 million in unreported federal income. I searched through Helen's filing system for any partnership agreement, joint ownership documents, or shared responsibility arrangements. Found nothing. No legal paperwork, no signatures, no documentation establishing any business partnership between Helen and me. Either Vincent was lying about the partnership documents, or he had forged legal paperwork to implicate me in his tax evasion scheme. I called James Whitmore, Helen's attorney in Phoenix. Mr. Mitchell, I reviewed Helen's will and all associated legal documents very carefully. She left you the entirety of her estate, including complete ownership of Canyon Ridge Agricultural LLC. No mention of any partnership agreements, no shared ownership structures. If someone claims you were a business partner before Helen's death, they'd need to provide legal documentation that Helen never shared with me. Mr. Whitmore, what if someone forged partnership documents after Helen's death? That would constitute multiple federal crimes: document forgery, conspiracy, fraud, especially if the forged documents were designed to shift criminal tax liability to an innocent party. I hung up and sat in Helen's office, surrounded by 8 years of emails documenting Vincent's systematic underreporting of cannabis revenue. Helen had discovered Vincent's tax fraud. She'd tried to convince him to operate legally and transparently. When he refused to change course, she'd made a different choice. She'd left everything to someone with 34 years of experience catching financial fraud. Vincent thought he could intimidate me with forged partnership documents. He thought I'd be overwhelmed by the complexity of cannabis regulations and accept his version of events. Vincent had never dealt with a forensic accountant who'd spent 3 decades catching people exactly like him. That's interesting, Vincent, because I never signed anything. I drove back to downtown Durango and found a FedEx office with computers, scanners, and copying equipment. Spent the next 4 hours creating complete digital copies of every document in Helen's filing system: the email correspondence, the financial records, the licensing documentation, the tax returns, the business contracts, everything. Then I called Elizabeth Parker, a tax attorney I'd worked with frequently during my auditing career. Liz specialized in cannabis business law and federal tax compliance issues. Ben Mitchell, it's been what, 3 years since you retired? How's retirement treating you? It's been complicated, Liz. I need your professional help with something. Cannabis business tax law. Interesting change of pace from insurance auditing. What's the situation? I explained everything: Helen's death, the $18 million inheritance, the discovery of the cannabis operation, the revenue discrepancies in the tax filings, Vincent's claims about partnership documents. Ben, if what you're describing is accurate, you're looking at a massive federal tax evasion case. $25 million annually for 8 years? That represents approximately $200 million in systematically unreported income. We're talking about criminal charges, not just civil tax penalties. What about Vincent's partnership claim? If someone forged legal documents to make you appear liable for tax crimes you didn't commit, that constitutes conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. But Ben, you need to understand something critical. The IRS doesn't care about family disputes or personal relationships. They care about collecting unpaid federal taxes from whoever appears legally responsible. If your name appears on any business documents as a partner or co-owner, you could be held liable regardless of whether you actually knew about the operation. What's my next step? Document absolutely everything. Don't touch anything else at that property without legal representation. Don't sign any documents. Don't engage in any further conversations with Vincent without recording them. And Ben? Yeah? Get a criminal defense attorney immediately. Night. I called the criminal defense attorney Liz recommended, James Rodriguez, specializing in white-collar federal crimes and cannabis industry legal issues. Mr. Mitchell, based on what you've described, you need to assume federal investigators are already aware of this operation. Cannabis businesses get audited regularly due to federal banking restrictions and state-federal legal conflicts. If they haven't discovered the revenue discrepancies yet, they will soon. What happens when they do? Whoever appears to be responsible for $200 million in unreported federal income will face serious federal prosecution, 15 to 20 years in federal prison, plus complete financial asset forfeiture. Even if I had absolutely nothing to do with the operation? The federal government prosecutes based on legal documentation and business ownership structures, not personal intentions or knowledge levels. If Vincent has created paperwork showing you as a business partner, you'll need to prove those documents are forgeries. I spent that night in a Durango hotel room, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything I'd discovered. Helen had left me an $18 million legitimate business, but she'd also left me in the middle of Vincent's 8-year tax evasion conspiracy. The next morning, I drove back to Helen's property. This time, I knew exactly what I was looking for. Helen kept everything, every receipt, every document, every piece of business correspondence. She maintained filing systems that would make federal auditors weep with joy. If Vincent had legitimate partnership documents, Helen would have copies in her files. I spent 3 hours searching every filing cabinet, every desk drawer, every storage box in the office building. No partnership agreements, no shared ownership documents, no legal paperwork establishing my involvement in Canyon Ridge Agricultural LLC. But I did find something else. A safe deposit box key taped to the underside of Helen's desk drawer. First National Bank of Durango, box number 2847. I drove to the bank and presented Helen's death certificate, along with my identification as the estate executor. Box 20847 was registered jointly to Helen Mitchell and Benjamin Mitchell, the bank clerk explained. You have complete access as the surviving account holder. Jointly registered, Helen had added my name to a safe deposit box I'd never known existed. The clerk led me to a private viewing room and brought box 2847. Inside, I found a thick manila envelope with my name written in Helen's careful handwriting. For Ben, when you're ready to understand everything. Inside the envelope, a computer flash drive, a handwritten letter from Helen, and 47 CD recordings labeled with dates from 2022 and 2023. I opened Helen's letter first. Ben, if you're reading this, Vincent has probably attempted to make you a legal partner in his tax evasion scheme. The recordings contain every phone conversation I had with Vincent over the past 2 years. He admits to systematically underreporting revenue. He admits to forging business documents. He admits to threatening me when I tried to operate the business legally and transparently. The flash drive contains copies of every financial record he thought I didn't maintain. I've been building a comprehensive federal case against Vincent since my cancer diagnosis. I left everything to you because you have the professional expertise to finish what I started. Vincent has been stealing from our family for 8 years. Don't let him steal your future. Use these recordings to get justice. All my love, Helen. I inserted the first CD into the bank's computer system. Helen's voice. Vincent, I've been reviewing our federal tax filings with a cannabis business attorney. We're reporting $800,000 in revenue, but we actually generated $26 million. Vincent's voice. Helen, that's exactly how this business works. Everyone in the cannabis industry uses similar tax strategies. It's basically industry standard practice. Helen, industry standard doesn't make systematic underreporting legal under federal law. Vincent, legal compliance is prohibitively expensive, Helen. We'd pay $12 million annually in federal taxes on legitimate revenue reporting. Helen, Vincent, I want to hire a specialized tax attorney and restructure our entire operation to ensure complete federal compliance. Vincent, Helen, you're being completely naive about business realities. I've managed this operation successfully for 8 years. I know exactly what works and what doesn't. Don't jeopardize our family's financial success, because you're having some kind of crisis of conscience. 47 recordings, 2 years of documented conversations, Vincent admitting to federal tax fraud, Vincent threatening Helen when she demanded legal compliance, Vincent claiming he had forged documents to protect himself if Helen ever decided to report him to federal authorities. Helen had recorded everything, and every conversation proved Vincent had been operating a criminal conspiracy while Helen tried to maintain legal compliance. Helen had left me a complete roadmap to destroy Vincent. I called James Rodriguez from the bank parking lot. Mr. Rodriguez, I found recordings of my brother-in-law admitting to systematic federal tax fraud and document forgery. Ben, stop talking immediately. Meet me at my office right now. Don't discuss any of this over the phone. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Rodriguez's downtown Durango office, playing selected recordings from Helen's collection. Vincent's voice. Helen, I've been strategically managing the books to minimize our federal tax liability. We report agricultural operating losses, equipment depreciation, crop failure write-offs, standard business practices for cannabis operations. Helen's voice. Vincent, we're systematically underreporting by $25 million annually. Vincent's voice. Helen, that's not underreporting. That's strategic tax planning within industry norms. Rodriguez stopped the recording. Ben, these conversations constitute clear admissions to multiple federal felonies, systematic tax evasion, conspiracy, fraud. What about his partnership claim? Keep playing the recordings. I fast-forwarded to a conversation from February 2024. Helen's voice. Vincent, I'm updating my will to leave complete business ownership to Ben. Vincent's voice. Helen, Ben can't handle this operation independently. He doesn't understand cannabis business complexities. Helen's voice. Ben's a CPA with 34 years of experience. He understands financial fraud. Vincent's voice. Fine. If you're absolutely determined to leave everything to Ben, I'll create documentation establishing him as a business partner since 2023. That way, if federal investigators ever audit us, he'll share legal responsibility for our tax planning strategies. Helen's voice. Vincent, you can't forge legal documents. Vincent's voice. Helen, I can protect this family using any methods necessary. Rodriguez stopped the recording and stared at me. Ben, Vincent just admitted to planning systematic document forgery. This recording proves he intended to frame you for federal crimes you didn't commit. So, the partnership documents are definitely fraudulent? Based on this evidence, absolutely. But Ben, we have a much bigger problem. Vincent's operation has been generating massive, unreported federal income for 8 years. The IRS will demand prosecution of someone responsible for that level of tax evasion. If Vincent successfully frames you as a business partner, you could face federal charges regardless of your actual involvement or knowledge. What do? We contact the IRS Criminal Investigation Division immediately. We present these recordings as evidence of Vincent's systematic fraud and conspiracy, and we get ahead of any criminal charges Vincent might attempt to bring against you. Contact the IRS voluntarily? Won't that trigger a federal investigation? Ben, the federal investigation is completely inevitable. Vincent has systematically stolen approximately $32 million in federal taxes over 8 years. The question isn't whether he'll be prosecuted. The question is whether he'll successfully frame you as his criminal accomplice. Rodriguez made the call from his office speakerphone. Special Agent Patricia Wilson, IRS Criminal Investigation Division, Denver Regional Field Office. Agent Wilson, I'm representing a potential federal witness in a major tax evasion case. My client inherited a cannabis business and discovered systematic underreporting of income. We have audio recordings of the perpetrator admitting to fraud, conspiracy, and document forgery. Agent Wilson wanted to meet immediately. The next morning, Agent Wilson drove to Durango personally. Badge number 7832, 20-year veteran of federal financial crimes investigation. Mr. Mitchell, I've reviewed the preliminary documentation your attorney provided. Canyon Ridge Agricultural LLC has been on our cannabis business watch list for approximately 2 years. Licensed cannabis operations that consistently report agricultural losses while maintaining expensive infrastructure typically indicate systematic revenue underreporting. So you already suspected tax fraud? We suspected irregularities. Now we have documented evidence. These recordings constitute clear confessions to multiple federal crimes, systematic tax evasion, criminal conspiracy, document fraud. What about Vincent's claim that I'm a business partner? Mr. Mitchell will thoroughly investigate any documents Vincent provides. But based on these recordings, it appears he's attempting to frame you for federal crimes he committed independently. That constitutes additional charges of conspiracy and obstruction of federal justice. Agent Wilson placed a thick manila folder on Rodriguez's conference table. Mr. Mitchell, I need you to understand something critical. Vincent Kane is about to be arrested for systematic federal tax evasion. When that happens, he's facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison. People facing that kind of prison time sometimes make extremely desperate decisions. What kind of decisions? They destroy evidence. They flee the country. They create fraudulent documentation to shift criminal blame to other people. They threaten witnesses. What do you need from me? Complete cooperation with our investigation. We need unrestricted access to all business records at the Canyon Ridge property. We need you to wear a recording device if Vincent contacts you again for any meetings or conversations. And Mr. Mitchell? Yes? We need to move very quickly. Once Vincent realizes we're investigating him, he'll either disappear or attempt to destroy everyone he thinks might testify against him. Agent Wilson left her business card with direct contact information. Mr. Mitchell, Vincent Kane thinks he's been operating a successful tax evasion scheme for 8 years. What he's actually been doing is creating a perfect federal criminal case against himself. Your wife documented everything we need to send him to federal prison for the rest of his life. After Agent Wilson left, I sat in Rodriguez's office reviewing everything Helen had left me. The recordings, the financial documents, the business records, the legal evidence. Helen hadn't just left me an inheritance. She'd left me a federal criminal case. But Agent Wilson's warning stayed with me. Vincent was facing 20 years in federal prison. He had forged documents claiming I was his business partner, and now federal agents were actively investigating his operation. Vincent was about to discover that I wasn't the confused, overwhelmed widower he thought he could manipulate. They think I'm the mastermind. Vincent had set me up perfectly. Vincent called me that evening while I was having dinner at my hotel. Ben, we need to talk urgently, face to face. There's been some serious misunderstanding about the business operation that requires immediate clarification. What kind of misunderstanding? The kind that involves federal investigators asking detailed questions about Canyon Ridge Agricultural's business partnerships and tax reporting strategies. My stomach dropped. The federal investigation was moving faster than I'd expected. Vincent, what did you tell them? I told them the truth, Ben, that you've been a legal business partner since March 2023, that you've been involved in all major financial and operational decisions, that the tax reporting strategies were joint decisions made by both partners. Vincent, that's not true. Ben, I have legal documentation establishing your partnership status, signed agreements, business correspondence, financial records showing your involvement. I never signed any partnership agreements. Ben, the documentation says otherwise, and federal investigators are very interested in interviewing you about your role in the business operations. I felt the trap closing around me. Vincent had created a perfect setup, forged documents making me appear responsible for his tax crimes, combined with federal investigators who would prosecute based on written evidence, regardless of my actual knowledge or involvement. Vincent, we need to meet and resolve this situation before it gets completely out of control. Agreed. I'm flying to Colorado tomorrow morning. Can you meet me at the farm around 3:30 p.m.? Conference room B in the office building. Conference room B. Vincent was talking like this was a corporate business meeting instead of a conversation between family members discussing federal tax fraud. Sure, Vincent. 3:30. Ben, bring any legal representation you think you need. This conversation needs to be completely transparent and properly documented. After I hung up, I called Rodriguez immediately. Ben, this is actually perfect. Vincent wants to meet face-to-face because he's panicking. He knows federal investigators are closing in, and he wants to negotiate some kind of deal. What kind of deal? Either a cooperation agreement where you both provide evidence against other cannabis businesses, or a narrative structure where everything was your idea and he was just following your instructions. What do? You wear a recording device and let Vincent confess to everything on tape. The next morning, Agent Wilson drove to Durango personally with FBI technical specialist Agent Martinez. They brought recording equipment that looked like a regular shirt button. Mr. Mitchell, Colorado law allows one-party consent for recording conversations. You can legally record any conversation where you're a direct participant. Vincent won't know he's being recorded unless you tell him. What if he becomes violent or threatening? We'll have federal surveillance teams positioned around the entire property. If Vincent becomes threatening or dangerous, we'll intervene immediately. What should I say to encourage him to talk? Let Vincent lead the conversation completely. People who are panicking about federal prosecution usually talk too much. Vincent will probably try to convince you to accept legal responsibility for his tax evasion scheme. Just ask clarifying questions and let him explain his reasoning in detail. Quote, at 3:15 p.m., I drove to Helen's farm property. Vincent's rental car was already parked near the office building. I found him in conference room B, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Expensive business suit, but rumpled and wrinkled. Designer briefcase, but his hands were visibly shaking. Ben, sit down. We need to discuss our legal situation very carefully. Our legal situation? The federal tax investigation situation. I've been contacted by IRS criminal investigation agents. They're asking specific questions about Canyon Ridge Agricultural's tax filings and business partnership structures. What kind of specific questions? Questions about systematically underreported revenue, questions about business partnerships and shared operational responsibility, questions about who's been making financial and tax reporting decisions for the past 8 years. Vincent opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. Ben, I need to show you something critical. Legal partnership agreements that Helen signed before she died. Documents clearly establishing you as co-owner of Canyon Ridge Agricultural since March 2023. He slid the papers across the conference table. Official business letterhead, complex legal language, signatures that looked convincingly like Helen's handwriting. Vincent, Helen never mentioned any partnership arrangement to me. Helen was protecting you from unnecessary stress, Ben. She didn't want you worrying about business operational complexities while you were enjoying retirement. But legally, you've been a 50% business owner for almost 2 years. I flipped through the documents carefully. They looked professionally prepared and legally legitimate. Notarized signatures, official corporate seals, proper legal formatting. Vincent, if these documents are authentic, why didn't Helen's attorney mention them during the will reading? Because Helen maintained separate legal representation for business operations versus personal estate planning, different law firms, different specializations. And these partnership documents make me legally responsible for what specifically? Everything, Ben. Every business operational decision, every tax filing, every revenue reporting strategy since March 2023. Vincent leaned forward across the conference table. Ben, federal investigators think someone deliberately and systematically underreported $25 million in annual revenue. They're actively seeking someone to prosecute for federal tax evasion. With these partnership documents, you're legally responsible for 50% of those business decisions. What are you suggesting we do? I'm suggesting we work together to handle this federal investigation properly. Family protects family, right? We hire the best criminal defense attorneys money can buy. We negotiate a reasonable settlement with federal authorities. We avoid criminal prosecution entirely. What kind of settlement? We pay the outstanding back taxes, plus reasonable penalties and interest, maybe 8 to 10 million total. Split the cost between both business partners. Everyone walks away clean without criminal charges. And if I don't agree to that approach? Vincent's facial expression changed completely. The family concern disappeared, replaced by something much colder. Ben, you're not fully understanding our legal situation here. The IRS has documented evidence of massive systematic tax evasion. They have business partnership records clearly showing you as a legal co-owner. They don't care about your personal intentions or your claimed lack of knowledge. They care about collecting $200 million in unpaid federal taxes from whoever appears legally responsible. Vincent, are you threatening me? I'm protecting you from federal prosecution, Ben. The alternative is 20 years in federal prison and complete financial asset forfeiture. What makes you confident federal authorities will accept a settlement negotiation? Because I understand how cannabis business federal taxation actually works, Ben. I've been successfully managing cannabis business tax issues for 8 years. I have established relationships with federal investigators, specialized tax attorneys, and regulatory compliance officials. I can negotiate deals you couldn't achieve independently. Vincent pulled out another legal document. Ben, I need you to sign this federal cooperation agreement. It establishes that we'll work together as business partners to resolve our tax compliance issues. Joint legal defense, shared financial responsibility, unified negotiation strategy. I looked at the cooperation agreement carefully. It was essentially a detailed confession document disguised as a legal strategy paper. Vincent, this document explicitly admits to systematic federal tax evasion. Ben, the tax evasion already happened. The question is whether we handle the consequences together as business partners or separately as individual defendants. And if we handle it separately, Ben, you really don't want to find out what happens if we handle this separately. I pretended to consider the legal documents while the hidden recording device captured every word Vincent said. Vincent, help me understand something you said earlier. You mentioned Helen never had the guts to stop you. Stop you from doing what, specifically? Vincent realized he'd revealed too much. I meant stop the aggressive business expansion. Helen was naturally conservative about growth strategies and market risk. But you specifically said she never had the guts to stop you from underreporting revenue to federal authorities. Ben, you're misinterpreting what I said. Vincent, I'm not misinterpreting anything. You've been systematically stealing from this family for 8 years. Vincent's carefully maintained mask dropped completely. Ben, stealing is an extremely strong word. I've been strategically protecting this family's financial interests. Helen built a $20 million annual business because I managed the tax optimization strategies that kept it profitable, by committing multiple federal crimes, by using standard industry accounting practices that every successful cannabis business in Colorado employs. Vincent, other people committing crimes doesn't make your crimes legal. Ben, absolute legal compliance is prohibitively expensive. You want to pay $12 million annually in federal taxes? You want to operate this business like some naive Boy Scout nonprofit and watch our family profits disappear completely? Our family profits? Ben, this business exists and succeeds because I spent 8 years building operational relationships, managing regulatory compliance, and handling complex federal taxation issues. Helen couldn't have achieved this level of success independently. So you think you deserve half the business profits? Ben, I deserve not to go to federal prison because Helen developed an attack of conscience during her final months when she was dying of cancer. Vincent was admitting everything on tape. Systematic tax evasion, 8 years of manipulation and control over Helen, forged partnership documents, conspiracy to frame me for federal crimes he'd committed. Vincent, you're absolutely right about one thing. What's that? Helen never had the guts to stop you. Vincent smiled, thinking he'd successfully convinced me to accept his version of events. But I will stop you. Vincent stared at me for 15 seconds, trying to process what I'd said and whether I was bluffing or actually had some kind of leverage against him. Ben, that sounds very much like a threat. It's not a threat, Vincent. It's a promise. I pulled out my phone and played one of Helen's recordings. Vincent's voice came through the speaker. Helen, I've been strategically managing the books to minimize our federal tax liability. We report agricultural operating losses, equipment depreciation, crop failure write-offs. Helen's voice. Vincent, we're systematically underreporting by $25 million annually. Vincent's voice. Helen, that's not underreporting. That's strategic tax planning. Vincent went completely pale. Ben, where did you get that recording? Helen left me 47 recordings of your conversations over the past 2 years. Every admission of systematic federal tax fraud. Every threat you made when she tried to operate the business legally. Every detail of your 8-year criminal conspiracy. Ben, those recordings were made illegally. You can't use private conversations in federal court. Colorado law allows one-party consent for recording conversations, Vincent. Helen could legally record any conversation she participated in. Vincent stood up and started pacing around the conference room. Ben, you don't understand what you're doing here. Those recordings prove Helen was completely complicit in our tax optimization strategies. She knew about the revenue underreporting. She participated in every business decision. Vincent, those recordings prove Helen repeatedly tried to convince you to operate legally and you systematically refused. Ben, Helen signed every tax return. Helen approved every financial report. Helen was a complete business partner in every operational decision. Vincent, Helen was trying to protect the legitimate family business while you were systematically stealing from it. Vincent stopped pacing and sat back down at the conference table. Ben, let's be completely realistic about our situation. You have recordings of normal business discussions between equal partners. I have legal documentation establishing your ownership status and operational responsibility. We both have evidence that could seriously hurt each other. What exactly are you proposing? Mutually assured destruction, Ben. You release those recordings to federal authorities. I'll make absolutely certain they understand you've been a legal business partner in Canyon Ridge Agricultural since 2023. You'll face exactly the same federal charges I'm facing. Vincent, there's one significant problem with your strategy. What's that? Federal investigators already have copies of all the recordings. I gave them complete documentation yesterday. Vincent's face went completely white. You did what, exactly? I contacted IRS Criminal Investigation Division, Agent Patricia Wilson, badge number 7832. She's been investigating Canyon Ridge Agricultural for 2 years. Ben, what did you tell them? Everything. The systematically underreported revenue, the forged partnership documents, the threats against Helen, the 8-year criminal conspiracy. Vincent slammed his hand down on the conference table. Ben, you just destroyed both of us. Federal tax authorities don't care about family disputes or personal relationships. They'll prosecute everyone with documented legal ownership of that business operation. Vincent, that's exactly where you made your critical mistake. What mistake? You forged documents claiming I was a business partner, but Helen recorded you admitting the documents were completely fraudulent. I played another recording. Vincent's voice, if you're absolutely determined to leave everything to Ben, I'll create legal documentation showing he's been a business partner since 2023. That way, if federal investigators ever audit us, he'll share legal responsibility for our tax planning strategies. Helen's voice, Vincent, you can't forge legal documents. Vincent's voice, Helen, I can protect this family using any methods I consider necessary. Vincent listened to his own voice, confessing to systematic document forgery. Ben, that recording doesn't prove anything legally significant. Business partnerships can be established through verbal agreements and operational practices. Written documentation is simply formal confirmation of existing business relationships. Vincent, the recording proves you specifically planned to frame me for federal crimes I didn't commit. Ben, you're misinterpreting standard legal strategy as criminal conspiracy. Agent Wilson didn't interpret it that way. Vincent pulled out his phone. Ben, I'm calling my criminal defense attorney immediately. This conversation is completely over. Vincent, the conversation was over the moment you tried to frame me for systematic federal tax evasion. Vincent started dialing, then stopped and stared at his phone. Ben, do you fully realize what you've done here? You've just triggered a comprehensive federal investigation that will completely destroy Helen's legitimate business, eliminate your $18 million inheritance, and probably send both of us to federal prison for 20 years. Vincent, Helen's business operations were completely legitimate. Your systematic tax evasion scheme was criminal. Ben, there's no practical difference. Helen built that business using exactly the tax optimization strategies I implemented and managed. You can't separate the legitimate business operations from the financial management practices. Vincent, I can separate them, and I did. The legitimate business is worth $18 million. Your tax fraud scheme cost the federal government $32 million. Helen created genuine economic value. You systematically stole money from federal tax authorities. Vincent sat back down, staring at the forged partnership documents he'd brought to convince me. Ben, those legal documents are binding regardless of whether you knew about them at the time. Vincent, those documents are systematic forgeries. Helen never signed any partnership agreement with you. Prove it. I pulled out another recording device and played Helen's final business conversation. Helen's voice. Vincent, I'm updating my will to leave complete business ownership to Ben. Sole ownership, no shared arrangements, no business partnerships of any kind. Vincent's voice on the recording. Helen, that's a serious mistake. Ben can't handle sole business ownership and operational responsibility. And Helen's voice. Vincent, Ben will figure out what's best for the legitimate business operations. Vincent listened to Helen, explicitly rejecting any business partnership arrangement. Ben, even if those specific partnership documents are questionable, the actual business operations establish implied partnership through practice. I managed daily operational decisions. I handled financial reporting. I maintained regulatory compliance. That creates legal business partnership regardless of written agreements. Vincent, you were a paid employee. Helen's payroll records show management consulting fees. I was absolutely not an employee. Vincent, Helen's comprehensive payroll documentation shows $48,000 annually in management consulting fees paid to Vincent Kane. Employee tax classification, federal withholdings, W-2 tax documentation. Vincent stared at me with complete shock. Ben, how could you possibly know about Helen's detailed payroll records? Because I spent 34 years professionally auditing business financial operations. Helen documented absolutely everything, including your specific employment status and compensation structure. Ben, that's completely impossible. I never agreed to any employee status classification. Vincent, you cashed every single paycheck for 8 years. I could see Vincent rapidly calculating, trying to understand how his perfect frame job strategy had disintegrated so completely and thoroughly. Ben, you've been systematically planning this entire setup. The recordings, the federal investigation, the payroll documentation. You've been building a comprehensive criminal case against me. Vincent, Helen built the complete criminal case against you. I just discovered it and turned it over to federal authorities. Vincent stood up again, but this time he wasn't pacing nervously. He was preparing to leave immediately. Ben, this situation is not over. I have 8 years of established business relationships throughout Colorado. I know every distributor, every processor, every regulatory inspector. I can completely destroy that business operation. Vincent, you just confessed to systematic tax evasion, document forgery, and threatening a federal witness. What federal witness? I touched the recording device hidden in my shirt button. Me. Vincent realized the entire conversation had been recorded by federal investigators. Ben, you son of a bitch. Vincent, Helen says hello. After Vincent left the conference room, Agent Wilson and her federal surveillance team entered immediately. They'd monitored the entire conversation through my recording device. Mr. Mitchell, Vincent Kane just confessed to systematic federal tax evasion, document forgery, criminal conspiracy, and threatening a federal witness. That recording provides sufficient evidence for multiple serious federal charges. What happens now? We arrest Vincent before he can leave Colorado. His return flight to Phoenix is scheduled for 8 p.m. tonight. We'll take him into federal custody at Durango Regional Airport. What about Canyon Ridge Agricultural? The legitimate business operations will continue under federal oversight while we complete our criminal investigation. The lawful business activities will be completely preserved. The criminal tax evasion schemes will be prosecuted to the full extent of federal law. Agent Wilson packed up her surveillance equipment. Mr. Mitchell, we'll need you to provide testimony at Vincent's federal trial. But based on the comprehensive evidence Helen compiled over 2 years, this is going to be a very straightforward criminal prosecution. And Vincent Vua confessed every federal crime on tape. After the federal agents left Canyon Ridge Agricultural, I sat alone in Helen's office for 2 hours, looking at the legitimate business she had built, the meticulous records she had maintained, the comprehensive criminal evidence she had assembled against Vincent. Helen had known she was dying from cancer. She had spent her final months systematically building a federal criminal case against Vincent while simultaneously protecting the legitimate business operations she'd created. Then I discovered Helen's final video message, hidden in her computer desktop, disguised as a routine data backup file. Final message Ben MP4. I clicked on the file, and Helen's face appeared on the computer screen, visibly thin from aggressive chemotherapy treatments, but absolutely determined and clear-minded. Ben, if you're watching this video, Vincent has probably tried to make you a legal partner in his systematic tax evasion scheme. I hope you found all the audio recordings I made. I hope you contacted federal authorities immediately. I hope you're prepared to finish what I started. Helen paused, looking directly into the camera with complete seriousness. Ben, I never told you about the cannabis business because I was deeply ashamed. Not ashamed of building something economically successful, but ashamed of allowing Vincent to manipulate me into criminal tax evasion schemes for 8 years. I let family loyalty override legal compliance and moral principles. Another pause. Vincent systematically convinced me that reporting legitimate revenue would completely destroy our business profits, that cannabis businesses had to operate in federal legal gray areas to remain economically viable. That family should always protect family, regardless of legal or ethical considerations. Helen leaned closer to the camera. Ben, Vincent was completely wrong about everything. Cannabis businesses can operate both legally and profitably under full federal tax compliance. Proper tax reporting doesn't destroy legitimate business operations, and family loyalty never, ever justifies systematic criminal behavior. Helen's expression softened slightly, and she smiled. I know you'll do the right thing, Ben. I know you'll preserve the legitimate business operations and eliminate all the criminal elements completely. I know you'll hold Vincent fully accountable for everything he's systematically stolen from our family over 8 years. Helen's final words. I left everything to you because you have the professional integrity I should have maintained throughout this situation. Don't let Vincent steal from you the way he systematically stole from me for 8 years. Use this business to accomplish genuine good in the world. Make me proud of what we built together. The video message ended. I sat in Helen's office as the sun set over the Colorado mountains, processing everything that had happened. Helen had built a $26 million annual legitimate business operation. Vincent had systematically stolen $8 million in federal taxes over 8 years. Helen had meticulously documented every criminal act and left me all the tools necessary to achieve complete justice. Sometimes in chess, the weakest pawn becomes the most powerful piece on the board. Helen had transformed me from spectator to checkmate piece. 3 months later, Vincent Kane pled guilty to systematic federal tax evasion, criminal conspiracy, document forgery, and threatening a federal witness. Sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, ordered to pay $32 million in back taxes, penalties, and interest to federal authorities. Canyon Ridge Agricultural LLC continued operating under comprehensive federal oversight and complete tax compliance. Annual legitimate revenue, $26 million. Annual federal tax liability, $8 million. Annual net profit, after all expenses, $12 million. Clean money, legal business operations, Helen's legitimate business, properly managed according to federal law. I converted Helen's farm property into the Helen Mitchell Cannabis Education Center, legal advocacy and support for small cannabis farmers, education about proper tax compliance and federal regulatory requirements, protection against corporate manipulation and criminal tax schemes. The Education Center provides free legal assistance to cannabis farmers who discover they've been victimized by tax evasion conspiracies. We help them achieve federal compliance without losing their legitimate business operations. Vincent can contact me through his federal prison counselor system after he completes his 12-year sentence. Helen's final gift wasn't just $18 million in legitimate business assets. Her final gift was teaching me that love sometimes means building the legal tools necessary to stop the people who are systematically stealing from your family. Justice wrapped in law, delivered with precision. If you've ever wondered what genuine love looks like when it's implemented through comprehensive legal strategy, drop a comment about where you first suspected someone close to you was hiding financial secrets. Sometimes the most valuable inheritances come with detailed instructions for achieving justice.